how do you define a resilient project manager?
One that is adaptable, flexible, guiding, nurturing, coaching, project manager who is able to take a team of individuals that are set out with an original strategic objective and make sure that that team can go through the complexities that surround every project, the constraints that every project has, and go through the hurdles of stakeholder psychology, if you will, over a period of time, and make sure that project ultimately delivers the business results that originally was intended for. And it's a long sentence, but it's a difficult job, and it's a difficult attribute, if you will. To be a truly resilient project manager requires a set of skills that are much more above and beyond technical skills, if you will. One needs to have a strategic leadership capability. One needs to have business acumen. One needs to have a general leadership, team dynamic capability, and one needs to be able to build a network in the context that they operate so that their project, their team, their mandate keeps getting the support from the organization and from the environment that they operate in.
Excellent. Can you talk a little bit about what people tend to get wrong about being a resilient project manager?
Sure. I think what resilient doesn't mean is it doesn't mean that you're going to have to stick with the original beliefs, if you will, that you're going to have to be rigid and make sure that you walk through the walls to deliver what exactly was written in the original plan. And I say that because there's a tendency of a lot of project management professionals, if you will, to make sure that they deliver it on budget, milestone, and the critical deliverables that they signed up with. Having said that, of course, they're extremely important. But having said that, in the environments that we're seeing right now in every sector, the volatility, uncertainty is so high that almost every project is going to go through some sort of critical evaluation. The constraints will change, the budgets may change, resources will reassign or reshuffle. And it means that at the end of the day, what the project manager's duty is to make sure that the business result is delivered. Not necessarily what the original scope may have captured it, hopefully, but it may also change, right? Because ultimately, every project is trying to deliver the change and the business results, and that should be the primary focus. And I don't think, I think this is relatively well understood, but I don't think it is generally understood globally right now. And we see that, that type of discussion a lot. And we also see at PMI that there has been a significant emphasis on, technical capabilities and etc. But what makes a great project manager, one that is resilient, is not the technical skills. It's more, understanding the organizational dynamics, being able to build and motivate and coach a team, and being able to operate in a context that seems to be constantly changing.
That makes a lot of sense. If that's the case, then what kind of advice would you give a project manager who wants to become more resilient?
First of all, I think there's a lot to learn. I will start with that because I think this profession especially is one that is in the center of every change, right? There's nothing that gets delivered that doesn't have people, a scope, a direction, whatever we call it. We may call it project, we may call it a scrum, we may call it a release train. At the end of the day, every change is delivered through a number of people getting together with a direction and doing things. So given that the environment that we live in right now, and the amount of change and complexity, uncertainty surrounding every one of our projects, the number one thing that project managers need to be open-minded about is the amount of learning that they need to go through. And at PMI, we talk a lot about continuous learning. We talk a lot about some people say fail fast. You may also say learn fast, right? But it's easier said than done, right? How do you make sure that you create a project team dynamic and environment where learning becomes the number one attribute and sharing of some failures is celebrated and discussed, not necessarily protected? I think that's a very important attribute. I think project manager needs to build that type of safety zone, if you will, and create support from the rest of the organization to have open dialogues so that individuals in the team feel comfortable being really straightforward if something is not working, saying so. So that's number one. I think is very important. Number two is resiliency also requires different diversity. Diversity of thought, diversity of capabilities. So a project manager needs to be able to bring that diversity into the team and also nourish that diversity. Make sure that personality types don't overwhelm another person. If there is diversity, it should be able to come out in the room, in the conversations. And again, I think the two things I'm talking about are all soft skills. So you can see that I didn't start with the technical skills, putting Gantt charts and so forth, because we really believe at PMI that soft skills, critical thinking, leadership, team dynamics, etc. Those are really extremely important, especially right now when we have distributed teams operating globally, not seeing each other, talking over the internet, not necessarily sometimes, most of them co-located, etc. Those are tough challenges for any project to flourish. So that's I think second skill. Number three, the strategic context, critical thinking. Asking questions about really understanding how is my organization and the direction changing, and what does it do to my project? Is my project still 100% aligned with what we were trying to do? Can everybody on my team, if I were to ask them, what are the three things that we must get right, would they answer the same way? And you would find sometimes that people don't answer the same way. That is misalignment. So bringing that strategic clarity, why we're doing what we're doing, are we doing the right thing? Are we doing it the right way? Those are extremely important skills to become resilient as a project manager.
If that's advice for project managers on how to be more resilient, what advice would you give the organizations to help their PMs be more resilient?
Absolutely. I think that organizations where that actually focus on delivery and effective and efficient delivery know this very well, that every change is delivered through a project, and project managers are at the core of delivering strategic objectives. So the way in an organization that manifests itself, that really understands that is so, is giving project managers, project leaders the chair around decisions that are actually impacting them, giving them a voice and making sure that there is constant communication and they are empowered, to go back to their project teams or to bring their project teams in the room, and making sure that that the objectives are understood and delivered and discussed and so forth. Those are extremely important, attributes of an effective, efficient organization that gets resilience. Secondly, creating a safe zone, empowering individuals to talk about their successes as well as their failures, and turning every opportunity into a learning opportunity and sharing it widely. Because especially, again, right now, when every organization, whether they're an organization that's been in business for 50 years or an organization that's been in business for 5 years, the next 5 years is quite uncertain for all of them, right? Our ability to respond, our flexibility and adaptability is going to be the driver whether or not we will essentially be successful as organizations. So making sure that that is understood, and making sure that we train our staff, our teams, to think outside the box, to constantly learn, and to make sure that these projects become a learning opportunity for the organization, put them in the center, is extremely important, because ultimately organizational, and this is, I believe, Roger Martin who said it, organizations are very complex integrated systems. The work of the future will be delivered through projects. So if that is so, the organizations of the future should make sure that we actually empower and enable our project managers to deliver their best.
How did you learn to be so resilient?
Well, that assumes I am resilient. So I'd like to believe I am. Some of the things that I've done over my career, I think taught me the people that I work with. So let me give you an example. So I come from a consulting background. I used to be a management consultant. And I think what that gave me, what provided me as an opportunity, was that I was able to work on very different projects over, sometimes 6 months, sometimes a year. And I was able to learn different skill sets in each and every project. But more importantly, work with different leaders, different team members, and learn from their styles, their frameworks, if you will, and what worked and what didn't work, and constantly self-reflecting. I think that's one of the why I would consider myself a resilient project manager, because I put learning and self-reflection in the center of everything I do. It helps me, and I would hope that it would help others as well.
Is there anything else that you want to say that you haven't said already?
Well, I would one more time highlight the importance of flexibility and adaptability. And I think generally we as human beings have always the tendency to look for prescriptive answers, some recipes and so forth. And that is helpful, of course, those help. But I think as a project manager, generally, we all operate in different contexts. Every company is different. Every operation is different. Even in the same industry, you look at a company, for example, like J&J, another company that may be in the same space, like Procter & Gamble. They are different organizations. Their contexts are different. The way of working is different. What works in one company may not work in another. Therefore, the project manager that is trying to be resilient needs to be a really good reader of context and really really needs to understand what will work in this operation today to achieve the objective that I have today. And go past, above and beyond the prescriptions, recipes, and really make it unique to that organization that will eventually make it work for that.